Tonight, we examine a conflict fought not with weapons, but with tariffs and timber, a battle shaping the cost of the American dream. The Trump administration reignited a long-standing trade dispute by imposing heavy tariffs on Canadian softwood lumber, claiming unfair subsidies hurt American mills. Canada fired back, calling the duties baseless and launching legal challenges through the WTO and USMCA. This wasn't just about wood. It became a test of US-Canada relations, with billions of dollars and thousands of jobs at stake. For Americans, the impact is clear. Higher lumber prices mean higher housing costs, squeezing home builders and buyers alike. The dispute signals a global shift toward protectionism, disrupting supply chains and forcing businesses to rethink strategies. In our interconnected world, a tariff on lumber sends ripples across the global economy, changing the rules for everyone. To truly understand today's conflict, we need to look back over a century of US-Canada lumber disputes. The roots of this battle stretch deep into the forests of both nations, shaping not just economies, but also the communities that depend on timber. At the heart of the issue lies a fundamental difference. Canada's vast forests are mostly government-owned, with the government setting low stumpage fees for logging rights. In contrast, the US timber industry is largely private, with prices determined by the open market. This creates a stark divide in how lumber is produced and priced. US producers have long argued that these low Canadian fees act as unfair subsidies, allowing Canadian companies to sell lumber at lower prices and undercut American mills. This has led to frustration and protests among American workers who see their jobs threatened. This fundamental difference has fueled repeated lumber wars over the decades, with each side imposing tariffs, negotiating settlements, and reaching temporary agreements that never seem to last. The 2006 Softwood Lumber Agreement brought a rare decade of relative peace, providing stability for both industries. But when it expired in 2015, old tensions quickly resurfaced. Negotiations to renew the agreement broke down, and long-standing grievances came roaring back. The U.S. Lumber Coalition, representing American producers, pushed hard for new tariffs to protect their industry. The Trump administration seized the opportunity, launching a new round of tariffs and reigniting the dispute on a scale not seen in years. The conflict once again dominated headlines and trade talks. Each cycle seems to end with temporary deals and uneasy truces, but the underlying conflict remains unresolved, simmering beneath the surface and waiting to flare up again. The result is a recurring trade battle that shapes not only the lumber industry, but also the livelihoods of workers and families in border communities across both countries. The latest chapter is just the newest round in a fight that never truly ends, a struggle with deep roots and no clear resolution in sight. In April 2017, the Trump administration made a pivotal move by imposing steep tariffs on Canadian softwood lumber, reigniting a trade dispute that had simmered for decades. This decision was not made in isolation, but rather echoed long-standing complaints from American lumber producers who felt disadvantaged by Canadian policies. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross publicly argued that Canadian government subsidies gave their lumber producers an unfair edge, allowing them to sell wood at lower prices and, in turn, harming U.S. mills and threatening American jobs. He emphasized that these practices undermined the competitiveness of the U.S. lumber industry. After a detailed investigation, the Commerce Department concluded that low Canadian stumpage fees, what companies pay to harvest timber, amounted to illegal subsidies under U.S. trade law, giving Canadian firms a significant cost advantage. The tariffs were designed to level the playing field, effectively raising the price of Canadian lumber to better align with U.S. market values. This move was intended to protect American producers from what they saw as unfair competition and to stabilize domestic lumber prices. President Trump linked the tariffs to his broader push for tougher, more favorable trade deals for the United States, casting Canada as a tough and sometimes uncooperative competitor in the global marketplace. He argued that strong action was needed to defend American interests. The final duties combined both countervailing and anti-dumping tariffs, averaging over 20% for most Canadian producers, a significant financial burden that would reshape the industry. The U.S. accused Canadian companies of dumping cheap wood into the American market, selling below fair value and putting American businesses at risk. Practically overnight, the economics of North American lumber trade shifted dramatically as a new financial wall rose at the border, complicating cross-border business and supply chains. With these actions, the stage was set for a new era of economic tension and uncertainty between two close allies, as both sides braced for the impact of a deepening trade conflict. Canada responded swiftly, launching legal challenges under NAFTA and the WTO, and calling the tariffs unfair. The government rolled out over $860 million in aid to support its lumber industry, helping mills and workers weather the storm. Canadian officials lobbied U.S. leaders, arguing the tariffs hurt Americans by raising housing costs. The strategy built alliances within the U.S. and highlight the integrated nature of both economies. Meanwhile, Canadian producers accelerated efforts to find new markets, especially in Asia, to reduce reliance on the U.S. The goal was not just survival, but long-term resilience and diversification. Canada's response showed both defiance and adaptability in the face of economic pressure. The tariffs' most immediate impact hit American families and homebuilders. Lumber is the backbone of new homes, so when prices soared, so did construction costs. The National Association of Home Builders tracked thousands of dollars added to the price of a typical new home. Builders faced a tough choice: absorb costs or pass them to buyers. Most passed them on. The result: higher home prices, pricing out hundreds of thousands of potential buyers. The pain spread to apartment construction and rents, worsening the housing affordability crisis. Canada supplies about a third of U.S. softwood lumber, especially key types for framing. U.S. mills couldn't fill the gap overnight, creating a supply bottleneck and driving prices higher. The policy aimed to help American producers, but ended up penalizing millions of consumers. The housing market became collateral damage in the trade war. The tariffs split American industry, pitting sawmill owners against home builders in a battle that would shape the future of American housing and manufacturing. The U.S. Lumber Coalition, representing sawmill owners, saw tariffs as a much-needed lifeline. For years, they argued, Canadian lumber, often subsidized by their government, flooded the U.S. market, making it nearly impossible for American mills to compete on price. With tariffs in place, sawmills in the South and Pacific Northwest began to invest in new equipment and expand operations. They hired more workers, hoping to revive local economies and restore pride in American manufacturing. For these communities, the policy felt like a win, promising stability and growth. But on the other side, the National Association of Home Builders called tariffs a direct tax on housing. They warned that higher lumber costs would raise the price of new homes, making homeownership even more difficult for millions of Americans already struggling with affordability. Builders faced mounting delays, contract rewrites, and frustrated clients as prices soared. Some projects stalled entirely, while others became too expensive for buyers to afford. The reality is, the U.S. simply doesn't produce enough softwood lumber to meet its own demand. Canadian imports fill a crucial gap, supplying nearly a third of the lumber used in American homes. Tariffs made these imports pricier, but domestic supply couldn't keep up, so prices rose for everyone. Builders, buyers, and even renters felt the pinch. The debate highlights a core tension in economic policy. A measure that helps a few thousand sawmill jobs can unintentionally hurt millions more in construction, real estate, and home buying. Real families and businesses on both sides feel the consequences. For every mill worker who benefits, there are countless homebuyers and small builders who face new challenges. Some win, but many lose. The lumber war is a case study in the complex, far-reaching impacts of protectionism, where every policy has winners, losers, and unintended consequences that ripple through the entire economy. The effects of lumber tariffs ripple far beyond construction. American timberland owners benefited as the value of standing timber rose, but transportation and logistics faced new hurdles. Disrupted cross-border flows complicated supply chains, and retailers had to choose between absorbing costs or raising prices for consumers. Even small home repairs became more expensive for Americans. In Canada, rural mill towns suffered slowdowns and closures, straining local economies despite government aid. The industry shifted toward larger, more automated mills, changing the social fabric of these communities. The dispute also strained U.S.-Canada relations, introducing new acrimony and uncertainty for cross-border businesses. A single protectionist policy proved capable of reshaping economies and alliances alike. Trade economists are skeptical of tariffs, and the lumber dispute is a textbook case. Dr. Emily Blanchard of Dartmouth argues tariffs offer short-term protection but long-term economic harm. The policy acts as a regressive tax, hitting lower and middle-income families hardest by raising housing costs. Tariffs distort markets, propping up less efficient U.S. mills while penalizing more efficient Canadian ones. For every sawmill job saved, many more are lost or never created in construction. The benefits are concentrated and visible, but the costs are widespread and hidden. Economists agree, a negotiated settlement, not a trade war, is the only sensible path forward. Stability and predictability benefit both industries and consumers far more than ongoing conflict. As of August 2025, the lumber dispute lingers, with tariffs still in place despite some reductions. Legal battles continue, but the core disagreement over Canadian stumpage fees remains unresolved. Both countries are stuck in limbo. Canadian producers diversify, U.S. homebuyers face high prices, and sawmills see mixed benefits. The central question, is this the new normal, or can a new agreement be reached? History shows only negotiation brings even temporary peace. A new softwood lumber agreement could stabilize the industry and restore predictability. This is more than a trade story. It's a test of economic and political cooperation. The choice ahead, build walls or build bridges, literally and figuratively.